Coming up on Unwritten.
Should everybody try to completely eliminate anger, or do you think it has a purpose in our lives?
Right now, we're having a conversation with an audience, and the goal is to create new synapses in their brain so they understand anger differently.
When people get angry, do you think it's typically a pinpoint cause?
If you're looking at the internal causes, there's just three. There's three main filters that cause anger. The first is, then the second filter is, and then the third filter is a filter of blame. And it's a really specific kind of blame. I call it unilateral blame.
You wrote a book called Life Changing Anger Cure.
Yeah, it reached a breaking point one day where I said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And I didn't talk to her or my father for 7 years.
Welcome, Mort Orman, MD, professional leading anger elimination expert. Can you tell me what draws you to anger, helping people with anger, and why you even decided to get into this field for almost 40 years now?
Yes. Well, back 40 years ago and earlier than that, I had a lot of anger in my life as I was going through college and medical school and my internship and residency, and even the first couple years in practice. So I would get angry at the drop of a dime. I would get angry at my patients if they didn't follow my advice. I would get angry just at anything. And I really couldn't control it. And it felt really bad to not be in control of my emotions. And I kept trying to figure out how to do it. I kept trying all the standard anger management, stress management techniques. It didn't really help that much. And then the other thing is taking care of patients. As a doctor, you get to see, you can figure out who the angry people are from the not so angry people. And as you follow people over time, you see what happens to them, health-wise and otherwise. And so I saw that a lot of the angry people, my angry patients, had more heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure and other health problems. They would, get divorced more often, get addicted to drugs more often, have their kids stop talking to them more often. And they would come in and tell you this stuff. And so you're witnessing this parade of, bad effects of anger, and you're sitting there with your own anger, not knowing how to deal with it. And that's what drove me to keep going. And so I started doing personal development work. And after a couple of years of doing a number of personal development programs, I finally put some things together that, to my surprise, enabled me to really handle my anger in a way that I didn't even think was possible. Where I could literally get rid of most of the anger that I had and stop reacting the way that I was habitually reacting to anger. And as soon as I had that major breakthrough for myself, again, being a doctor, I knew how important that was for people's health. So then I started writing about it and teaching about it. And so trying to get it out there, because I didn't see a lot of other people teaching people how to understand anger in the way I had learned how to understand it. So it was kind of an expression of being a doctor and trying to do true preventive medicine, keeping people from getting sick, as well as, knowing how to patch them up.
Yeah, preventing it opposed to
So that's why
putting a Band-Aid on it. Yeah.
That's why I got into stress and anger, because I saw it was so important to keep people healthy and to keep them from getting sick, or even deal with illness if they had it. Because, a lot of times people get angry when they get sick, or they get angry at other people in their lives when they're sick. So there's all kinds of ways in which anger, and health, play a role with each other.
What was the courses that?
Oh, there were all kinds of different things. I explored everything I could. I read a lot, and I went to different seminars and workshops and things. So, but it wasn't really one thing that this was the answer.
Yeah.
What I did is I took things from each program that I participated in, and I eventually cobbled together something that helped me understand the internal causes of my anger, because that's where the breakthrough came from, in understanding how I was generating the anger, that I didn't understand before, that I couldn't see the causes.
Do you think anger can be? Do you think when people get angry, do you think it's typically a pinpoint cause?
Well, it depends. If you're looking at the external triggers, there's thousands of them.
Okay.
All kinds of things can make people angry. But if you're looking at the internal causes, there's just three. And everybody who gets angry generates anger internally from the same three causes.
What
No
are they?
matter what the external circumstance is or how different it is, ultimately inside it boils down to you're looking at the world, you're looking at things, you're perceiving things and thinking about things in three main ways. And that I didn't understand when I was, going through all my training and in my 20s and 30s. I didn't understand that's how anger gets generated inside our brains and inside our bodies. And without those puzzle pieces, you can't really take control of your anger. You can.
What are those puzzle pieces?
Yeah, but they're really not that complicated, and
Okay.
it all comes from understanding, basic sort of human biology and how the brain works. And we never see the world as it actually happens because our brain, there's just too much information coming in to our
Yeah.
senses. Our brain can't process it all, so it has to kind of chunk it down. It has to simplify. It has to filter it before it presents reality to us. So everything that we see and everything that we think and ultimately feel is coming from our brain's filtering process. And we have thousands of different filters, some of which we acquire as we grow up and some of which we get from our culture. So our culture tells us what's good and bad and right and wrong and stuff, and that gets built in.
Yeah.
But if you got bit by a dog when you were 3 years old, you may have a filter, now all dogs are dangerous, and if you didn't have that experience, you wouldn't have that filter. But our brains accumulating filters as we go along in life. And everything we see is coming through those filters, and everything we perceive is coming through those filters. So there's three main filters that cause anger. Anger only comes when you're looking at things in three ways. The first is you have to be judging whatever happened as being bad or wrong, or somebody doing something or something doing something that they shouldn't have done. So, for example, if you're angry at your computer one day because it stops working when you're working on something, you go like, it's like, why are you angry? Well, it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Then the second filter is there has to be some, as a result of the bad behavior, there has to be some negative impact, some hurt or harm or inconvenience or negative consequence. Again, with your computer model, you're sitting there working and your computer stops working and you get angry. Well, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And now I'm being negatively impacted. I can't get my work done, or I might lose, the work that I just spent 2 hours.
That's exactly. I have that exact example.
Yeah. So that's the second filter. And then the third filter is a filter of blame. And it's a really specific kind of blame. I call it unilateral blame. It's like we have these horse blinders on, and we only are focusing on the bad behavior that we identified, the person who did the bad thing. We don't see any other causes. We just see what that person did or what we perceive that person to have done. So it's a very narrow focus of blame. So those are the three filters that cause anger in every human being. Doesn't matter what the external triggers are. Internally, it always comes down to those three, looking at it through those three filters. And when you think those are true, then that's where the emotion of anger comes from. So people should literally write this down on a Post-it note or an index card, or put it in their cell phone or something like that. But the three, somebody did something bad and wrong they shouldn't have done. Somebody was hurt or harmed or negatively impacted. And the person who did the wrong thing was unilaterally responsible or to blame. Those are the missing puzzle pieces that most people don't have about where their anger is coming from. And it's being generated by our brain. Our brain is telling us these things and is perceiving life events through these filters and telling us this is what's true about the event. Okay.
How do we start to, I guess, put those puzzles back together?
Yeah, but that's the question.
Yeah.
when I was angry in my 20s and 30s and I didn't have the puzzle pieces to know what was causing it, I didn't know the questions to ask, or I didn't know what to look at or to investigate. But it turns out if you start investigating those three filters whenever you're angry, those filters have holes in them most of the time. They're not completely accurate. They may be missing things. They may be missing important elements that you're not seeing, or you may be misinterpreting something or misconstruing something. So the filters give us a false sense of reality, but it feels true, and our brain is telling us it's true.
Yeah, it's like a way to just express how we feel and without any like consequences kind of.
Well, the feelings come after the filtering. So the filtering produces the feelings. Okay.
Mm.
You got to have the filtering first, and then you get the
Mhm.
anger. And then
Yeah.
the anger makes you feel like you're right about
Yeah.
what you're seeing. Okay. And then that sort of cements it. So you don't investigate it. You don't ask, could I be wrong here? Have I missed something? Or is there something wrong with one of these filters that my brain's
Mhm.
telling me is true? Because our brain is constantly playing tricks on us. I was just thinking this morning, I went out for my walk this morning, and I
Yeah.
was just thinking about how the brain tricks us. And it felt like if you're just standing on the street for a second, you stop and you're standing on the street, it feels like you're standing still. But we know we're not standing still. First, the earth is rotating, but
Yeah.
we can't feel that. Okay. And then the whole planet is moving through space. And,
Yeah.
so we're not standing still, but our brains give us this reality. So you're just standing perfectly still. Nothing's moving. No, everything's moving. So our
Well,
brain,
then even if you break it down further, like
yeah,
your all your cells, like you're never
yeah,
truly just
yeah,
still.
they're
All your
they're going,
cells are moving and
everything's changing, and they're changing.
yeah.
And some
Mhm.
cells are dying and being replaced by new cells. The whole body is just constantly, in flux. And your brain, same thing with your brain. Your brain's constantly changing. The synapses are forming. Every time you learn something, there's new synapses that form. What we're doing right now, we're having a conversation with an audience, and the goal is to create new synapses in their brain so they understand anger differently. And then you can practice. Like if you take those 3 filters and write them down, like I suggested, and you start practicing every time you get angry to realize where your anger is coming from. Oh, I'm thinking this way. I'm thinking this way. I'm thinking this way. You're training your brain with that knowledge. You're reinforcing more stronger synapses in your brain, so that over time, like now, I've been doing this for 40 years. I don't need anything written down now. When I get angry, boom, I know exactly it's this, and this. I know exactly where it's coming from because I've got those pathways in my brain. I didn't have that when I started. I had to keep practicing with it, like training wheels on a bicycle. You have to.
Do you do anything specifically?
to
Like when you feel these emotions?
well, the first thing is that I've had very little anger actually in the last 40 years. Occasionally, I get a little bit angry, but I know. Like I said, I now know exactly where it's
When
coming.
you understand it, it's
Yeah,
like
I know where it's coming from. I know to suspect there's probably some flaws in my filters, so I go looking for them immediately. Where I might have made a mistake in judgment, or where I made a mistake in perception, where I may have seen things the way they not really the way that they actually are, or maybe the truth is a little broader than what the limited filter is showing me, and I didn't take into consideration those things. Okay, so I can give an
mm,
example. So my wife and I just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. With I
congrats.
Thanks. But I'm telling you, would not have happened with the old me. Well, before I understood this anger thing and figured out how to get rid of most of my anger.
Really?
Yeah,
You
because
wouldn't have lasted?
fortunately I did that before I met her. Okay. And then I
Okay.
met her, and she didn't have a lot of anger in her life. So consequently, we don't have a
Mm,
lot of anger in our relationship. We don't fight a lot.
that's
We don't get into
good.
arguments. But in the beginning of our relationship, it turns out there was this one circumstance where we would start fighting with each other, and it was so weird. It was so rare for us. If you're in a relationship and you're arguing all the time, one argument from another
It
doesn't
gets
stand
exhausting,
doesn't
yeah.
stand out, and it gets exhausting. But when you're not having your baseline is zero, okay, and then something pops up, an argument, and this same argument popped up like 2 or 3 times, and I went like, "Whoa, something's going on here." Okay, and it turned out
Yeah.
it only happened when we were on a car trip somewhere.
Mm.
And even more interesting, it didn't happen. We didn't fight on the way down to our wherever we were going. Okay, we didn't fight when we were there. We had a good time or whatever vacation we were on or whatever. It only happened when we drove home, which made it
Mm.
even weirder. So and what usually would happen was I would be driving, my wife would be in the front seat, and we'd be driving home. And at some point, she would say, "Oh, there's something over here that I'd really like to go see. It's only like an hour off our path. Let's go do that." And I would go like, "No, we're not doing that," with a kind of a tone and an
Yeah.
automatic sort of. And then
Like, what
she
do you
would
think?
respond, yeah, and she would respond, like, "What do you mean we're not doing?" We go back and forth, and so I saw the pattern, I saw what was happening, and then I saw so I I reminded myself of the three filters, and I said, okay, am I judging her to be doing
Mm.
something bad and wrong that she shouldn't be doing? And I was like, yes, you shouldn't be deviating on this from the path home, like they're taking an hour side trip or something like that. So I was judging that to be her to be doing something bad and wrong by suggesting that. But then when I asked myself, is that really true? Is she really doing something bad and wrong? As soon as I asked the question, I realized, well, not really. I mean, she just has a different way of her different preference for how to do it than I do. And it turns out we have different family traditions. In my family, when we went on car trips, we drove directly home. We didn't deviate. Her family took side trips all the time, and that was their thing. Okay.
Pit stops. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't that my way was right and her way was wrong. That's what my brain was telling me. That was my filter was telling me that I was right and she was wrong. The truth is, neither of us were right and neither of us were wrong. It's just we had two different preferences, and each one was as good as the other. It didn't really, unless we had someplace we didn't have to be home at any particular time, that would have been critical, where taking a side trip would have been a problem. So we could have done either one, and it would have been fine. So as soon as I realized that the truth is she's not doing something wrong by wanting to go on a side trip, okay, that ended that problem forever, because now whenever she does that, we're driving and she wants to go take a side trip, I say, sure, honey, if you want to take a side trip, let's go do it. It's no longer, I don't perceive it as a wrongdoing
Yeah.
anymore. And there's no anger that comes up because you have to perceive it as a wrongdoing to get the anger. Okay.
Mm.
So that's just a good
Perceive it as a wrongdoing.
yes, yeah, and we do that a lot with people. We
That's when
get
you get into politics.
Yeah, absolutely. We get angry with people. We get angry with people because we perceive them doing wrong things. When if the
According
truth
to
is,
your values,
the truth is
your
they're doing.
belief.
It's not so it's much as wrong. It's just different from how you would do it or you think it should be done. And
Yeah.
that's a big source of a lot of this political anger that
Well,
we.
yeah, that's why I wanted to tell uh my story of my dream I just had. I just woke up from this dream.
Oh, this should be good. Okay.
It's such a weird dream, but I do think it relates
Okay.
to politics. Just such a weird dream. I felt like I rarely have dreams. So it just feels like when I do have dreams, it should be something I should like remember. That's that's how I feel about it now, because it's like since they happen so rarely,
Hmm.
when I do have them, I'm like, maybe I should remember this. But basically, like, it was like a movie. It was like I was watching a movie in first person, like from my perspective. And the whole movie, it was like a apocalyptic, like Mad Max kind of style, dark, grim, like. And we were a group of people like driving on this inmate bus, and we were on our way for a like trial.
Hmm.
Um, and most of these people were probably gonna get executed.
Hmm.
And the whole like dream movie was me. We were just stuck on this bus, and it was a bunch of different characters with different personalities. And the whole dream was me eavesdropping on these two girls planning their escape.
Hmm.
And basically, what had happened was when they started to plan their escape and leave the bus, it was like a riot. Everybody tried to leave the bus at the same time and just get out.
Yeah.
And we were all captured and sent for execution immediately.
Yeah.
And that was when I woke up.
Well, it's actually a perfect dream for what we're talking about, because what happens in our society is when you see somebody doing something bad and wrong, okay, and
Mm,
hurting and harming
yeah,
other people, and they're totally responsible or to blame, okay, we want to punish them,
yeah.
and our whole legal system is built on that model. You do something bad and wrong, you hurt and harm somebody, and you're to blame. You face
Behind
justice.
bars. Yeah.
And you get punished, or you suffer a consequence. And the consequence could be execution. It could be jail, could be execution, could be any of that stuff. But that whole response to those three filters. When you see
Mm,
things that way, our whole legal system has incorporated that into the punishment arm of our legal system, and it's we also expect it in day to day life. You know,
Yeah.
if you see somebody does something. did you ever did you ever see the movie Tin Man? There's this movie called Tin
Tin
Man.
Man.
Did you ever see
It
that?
sounds familiar.
It
I
was
don't think I've seen it.
it was Richard Dreyfuss and Danny DeVito were the two
Mm.
lead characters, and it was filmed in Baltimore in the 1950s, where I grew up. I was born and raised in Baltimore, and I grew up in the 1950s in Baltimore. So the movie kind of resonated with me. But anyhow, the
Mhm.
movie at that time, the big fad was to put aluminum siding on your homes. Okay, so
Mm.
so these two guys are aluminum siding salesmen, and they work for two different companies in the same city in Baltimore. They don't know each other, and Richard Dreyfuss has had some big sales, and so he goes and buys a new car, and he's at the dealership, which is in a residential neighborhood, and he takes possession of his car, finishes paperwork, and he's backing the car out, to drive it home. And Danny DeVito's in his car driving down this little residential street, one lane street, and he just had a fight with his wife, so he's not paying attention. He's not going fast, but he's just not paying attention. And he bumps in. He bumps into Richard Dreyfuss' brand new car.
Mm. And that's how they meet.
Yeah, that's how they meet. So, but Richard Dreyfuss gets furious. He's had this
Mm.
car for 30 seconds, and some guy hits him. So he gets out of his
Yeah.
car. Of course, he's a bigger guy. Danny DeVito is this little shrimpy guy, and he starts yelling and screaming at him. And of course, Danny DeVito thinks Richard Dreyfuss was at fault because he backed out without looking. Okay, so he's not admitting any blame. He's telling Richard Dreyfuss, "You're the guy. You're the problem." Richard Dreyfuss is trying to get Danny DeVito to admit he was the problem. And they keep going back
Yeah.
and forth. Neither one will see it anyway, the other way than their filters tell them to see it. And then finally, Richard Dreyfuss gets frustrated and he goes over and he knocks the side view mirror off of Danny DeVito's car and then he gets in his car and drives away. So Danny DeVito now feels like he has to retaliate. All right. So
And it's
this is
back
that
and it's
same
endless.
this is that same
Yeah.
mentality. You do something bad and wrong, and then you got to get punished. So he finds out where Richard Dreyfuss lives, and he goes and vandalizes his car one night. And Richard Dreyfuss wakes up, and now he knows who did it.
Is this a comedy?
It is like a comedy.
It
It's
was a
like
comedy?
yeah, and Richard Dreyfuss knows who did it, so he finds out where Danny DeVito lives, and he goes to. And then the whole movie is this back and forth. They keep
Oh,
upping the
wow.
ante. They keep
Yeah.
retaliating, and every time one of them does
That's
something
funny.
bad to the other one, they feel okay. Now I have to repay that, and the whole movie is like that. It's really hilarious.
How did they finally,
Well, at the end, firstly, the end, both of their lives are like totally destroyed by that
okay.
retaliation. But then they kind of bury the hatchet, and they say, okay, this is enough. Let's
Yeah.
just be
Like, there
friends.
comes a point where enough is enough, I think.
Yeah, and then become friends. So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna talk to you about the anger management movie. Have you seen that
I
one?
actually haven't seen that, to tell you the truth, because I'm not into. I'm so not into anger management. I'm really into anger elimination. I'm into
Uh,
anger elimination, which is not
well, that's what happens in the movie. He,
what's that?
like, finds a place where it's just, like, it's eliminated.
Oh, okay, well, good. Well,
But the whole movie was it's a hilarious movie, but the whole movie was, like, about kinda, like anger management anonymous style. Like, you go into this, like, group, and then people, like, go around
yeah,
talking about what they're angry about. And I remember specifically the scene in that movie. I think it was that movie where he goes to, like, a Buddhist temple where this guy that used to be like a chronic angry man became like a peaceful
yeah.
Buddha.
Well, that's what happened to
And
me. I
he
didn't become a Buddha, but I went from an angry guy to having
Yeah,
40 years with almost no anger at all. And
yeah,
yeah, and it's when you see a Buddha, a monk would be a perfect person to do that. When you see the world differently, and you've changed your filters, or you understand the how frequently your filters are misleading, and real
mm,
reality is different than what your filters are telling you, then you get very mellow, and you don't
yeah.
have
But the
much anger.
funny thing in the movie was, I think Adam Sandler's character, he was like antagonizing him,
Uh-huh.
like
Did he
like he kept poking him. And
did he get
the
him
funny thing,
angry
yeah, the
eventually?
funny thing that happened is he reverted back into his
Yeah.
angry,
Yeah,
like
and
he was
that's
a
true
monk,
too.
and then
That's
he
true
went
too. You
went
don't the
crazy.
anger, the tendency to get angry doesn't go away. It's just you learn how to get past it or see beyond it or see the world differently, but you still get tweaked. Because it's all reactive. It's all knee jerk reaction.
I think it's part of our like natural fight or flight,
Um,
isn't it?
it is, but then it also so emotions in animals, for example, and humans are different. So a dog, let's say, will get angry if you take its bone away, if it's
Mm-hmm.
enjoying a bone or a piece of meat or something, and you rip it away from them, they'll get angry. It's like a natural inborn, reaction, and we have that too. Okay, but we have language and we have concepts and we have socialization, and so we build things on top of that so that we get angry if we think someone dissed us, or we think somebody didn't show us the proper respect or something like that. And these are
Like
all
a
learned
gang.
these are all learned things that trigger that
Yeah.
response, where a dog would never, if you disrespect a dog, they're not going to get angry at you. It depends as long as you don't do something to them. But I mean, if you
Yeah.
just look at them with a face, of dislike or something, they're not going to necessarily get angry with you. But a human being will, because we've now associated disrespect with the wrongdoing, and then now that stimulates the anger chain, and then the whole thing happens and we get angry. But it's all happening. It's all reactive. It's all, for humans, it's knee jerk. But our brain is getting populated with all kinds of other triggers internally that will provoke our anger.
Mm-hmm.
So
Have you seen the documentary on Netflix about these prisoners that they want to release into basically like open community prison? Like, so there's, have you seen that?
I have not seen it.
Well, basically, it's this documentary where these prisoners are in there for like felonies and murder and gang violence.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically went from a 23-1 uh, schedule, like 23 hours locked in their cells, to 1 hour out.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole documentary was a test for 6 weeks. We will basically open all the doors and y'all will learn to live as a community and be self-sustainable.
Okay.
And the whole, like, the commonality, I haven't finished it. I only watched like the first 2 episodes, but the commonalities that I seen amongst all of them was anger. They just were all angry at the world, or angry at how things should be versus like how I think it should be, how you think it should be, or like don't test me, or like this is how it should be. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that I noticed among all the prisoners. They just like, it's like they just had this weight of anger on
Yeah.
on all of their shoulders.
And like we talked about, you correctly identify that's the first filter. Somebody's doing something bad or wrong. Okay. So if you
Mm,
have a perspective on the world that you're constantly seeing people doing wrong things that's affecting you, then you're going to have anger. And I would predict that the reason why these people are in prison is because they had that anger tendency before they got locked up. It led them to whatever the criminal behaviors were, or they acted out of their anger and got in
mm-hmm.
fights or killed somebody or stabbed somebody, or did some
Whatever.
retaliation against somebody. So the anger, probably the tendency to anger and the tendency to view the world that everybody's doing something wrong, and particularly to me, is going to get you a lot of anger, and that anger is going to, in some people, is going to land you in prison. So it's probably no accident that a lot of those people had anger issues, and I'm sure prison doesn't do anything to make that less of a problem.
Yeah.
It makes it worse.
I want to know your thoughts on this article about 3 reasons why you need anger.
Yeah.
It's a Berkeley
Well, I can
EDU.
tell you right now, it's total bullshit. Now, that's not to say that anger doesn't have some positive values, because it does. Okay. And
Yeah.
there are times when anger can be very beneficial in a person's life. I've worked with lots of people, mainly women, who've been in bad
Mm,
situations or bad relationships. They're being abused. Their lives are they're very unhappy, and they don't have they can't get themselves out of it. They can't motivate themselves to stand up to the person or to get out of the relationship until they get angry enough. And then
Mm,
sometimes it's getting really angry about what's going on and what's been going on that finally says, I've had enough. I'm going to do something about this. And then they get out or they get some help or whatever. So the anger was really beneficial to them to deal with the problem they hadn't been dealing with, and to get up the motivation to do it. So, and there are
that's
other times.
exactly what this article's about.
Yeah, and
That's
so
crazy.
there are good aspects to anger, but
Yeah.
to say you must have anger, firstly, these women didn't have to get to the point where the only thing that got them out of the situation was getting super angry. They could have gotten out of the situation a lot earlier by just taking a stand and saying, I'm not going to tolerate this. And they didn't have to have all the anger. So it's not necessary that you
Mm,
have to have the anger. That's what I'm saying is the bullshit part.
sometimes, uh, it's sometimes what people need though that helps them pivot. Like it's like
Yes.
a pivot point.
Yes, yes. So it can be beneficial. And I sometimes, like I say, even though I don't get angry, if I'm talking to a customer service rep and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not getting satisfaction with whatever my issue is, I'll pretend to be angry. Not because I'm
Yeah.
angry, but because I know that it'll get them motivated, and they'll
It'll
maybe
give you a discount.
or they'll pass
They'll
me on
give
to a
you a free month.
supervisor, and the supervisor will give you what you want. So it's, anger can, if you're raising kids, sometimes it's appropriate to be
That's
angry.
my biggest.
Yeah,
That's my
you
biggest
don't want to
one.
get angry frequently with your kids, but I mean,
Yeah.
if your kid's about to run out in front of traffic, you're getting that,
You don't
making it
want them.
angry.
Yeah.
No, you're
Like,
not
hey,
going to
get over here.
do that.
Yeah.
But it should be fairly infrequent, and for a lot of parents, it's not infrequent. It's like anytime the kid does anything wrong, or they
Mm,
disobey, or they don't follow instructions that have been given, parents will just automatically get angry, and then the kid doesn't feel so good,
yeah.
about having their parents get angry at them, and that causes downstream problems. So, that's one of the other reasons. Part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is to help people be healthier, but it's also to prevent divorces, to have families, be happier,
Just more happy. Yeah.
and have less conflict among them, because the anger really creeps in relationships and families very easily if you don't understand it. You know,
Oh, 100%. I'm
yeah,
like, I don't even speak to like some of my relatives because of anger.
yeah.
And like, I don't even want to blame like that. Like, that's like a anger thing, like a blame thing. And it's
Well, that's
like,
another punishment, by the way. Sometimes, well, there are lots of different
like
punishments.
silence
Taking yourself away is an effective
as a
punishment.
punishment for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Yelling at somebody can be a punishment. Making a face at them can be a punishment. Taking
Oh
something
yeah,
taking
the
something
brick
away from
wall
them that they
treatment.
enjoy can be a punishment. But basically, not talking to somebody is a punishment. It's an
Man,
expression of our anger, that we still have this anger towards them. You know,
I feel like life is too short.
yeah,
Like like I could die tomorrow and you had this anger on me
yeah,
and you gave me the silent treatment. And then what? Like
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, these three reasons why you need anger. It's funny. They I guess they were doing studies that suggest anger can help us achieve goals
Yes,
if you use it
yes.
wisely.
Hmm.
And the first example was anger can help us achieve challenging goals.
Hmm.
There was a study at Texas A&M where they showed people pictures that made them angry versus pictures of sadness, happiness, and amusement.
Hmm.
And then at the end of those, the slides that they were showing them, they gave them a challenging task like a puzzle
Hmm.
or a certain video game. And all of the studies suggested at the end that anger actually improved their results in these puzzles,
Hmm.
which is interesting. The second
But,
one
but
was
take the first one though. So
yeah, yeah.
suppose anger helps you, and we've seen this, like coaches that throw chairs, or get real angry at their players to get them motivated and stuff like that, can produce
Yeah.
results. So you can see all examples of where anger can produce results, but what you're not focusing on is look at all the other people that get similar results and they don't resort to anger to produce them. So it's not that you need to be angry
Mm,
to get those results. Sometimes anger will produce the results, but a lot of times you can get the results without the anger. And so it's
yeah.
not necessarily that it's a need. So go ahead. What's on number two? What's number two?
The second one was anger can increase civic engagement.
Yep.
There was a study where colleagues surveyed 1,000 people in California and Texas between 2016 and 2020. And the results showed that the angrier the people were, the more likely they were to engage in voting.
Sure. Sure. Because that,
So,
again, you want to take it, you want to take an action to punish whoever you're angry about.
yeah, I consider myself apolitical, but
Okay.
the next one is anger can help us recognize our needs in a relationship. And that's the one that you kind of gave the example about
Yep.
being hurt so much.
Yeah. Anger is a way of anger in a relationship. Anger is communicating. So you're letting someone know you're unhappy with what they're doing, or they crossed a boundary, and you're trying to protect your boundary or protect yourself against something. So it is an effective way to communicate, but it leads to lots of other negative consequences. So there's other ways to communicate that you don't have to get angry to defend yourself and to defend your boundaries, or to communicate to somebody that they've done something that displeases you. So again, here's where it turns out it's very commonplace that people will use anger to communicate, but it's not necessary. In fact, it's harmful to the relationship because it makes the other person
Mm,
feel bad, and then they want to retaliate, or they'll argue with you or get defensive, and then you're in a fight. And then when the fight ends, you both have these lingering kind of resentments, and then the more you do that, they build up, and then it
it's
can
like a
trouble.
cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, the need to communicate when something isn't going the way you want in a relationship is there and is real, but anger is probably not the top choice of the way to do it. Unfortunately, many people just resort to that because it's kind of automatic again. We just kind of do it.
How do
Uh,
we break that cycle?
well, part of it is understanding where the anger comes from, because usually when we're angry, like I said, we've got
The
some
three
faulty
things.
faulty view
Yeah.
of what the other person did, or our role in it, or not having a role in it, and we're not seeing the whole picture accurately. And if we start to see it more accurately, then a lot of times we'll realize there's nothing really to get angry about. We still may have a problem that needs to be dealt with, but it doesn't mean I have to get angry at the other person in order to work on it or to deal with
Yeah.
it. So there's all these subtleties and complexities that come into play. But basically, the more you understand where your anger is coming from, you'll be able to short circuit your own anger when you practice with this after a while. And you'll also understand why other people are angry, because they're angry for the same three
Mm.
filters that you are. Okay. So if somebody gets angry at you, you know now exactly why they're angry at you, because they think you did something wrong. They think they or somebody else were negatively impacted by what you did, and they think you're 100% responsible to blame. Okay?
Mm.
Now, you may know that some of those things aren't true about you, but they're over there with their filters and their brain telling them it is true, and you can easily recognize what's wrong with their filters. It's harder when we're trying to recognize what's wrong with our filters when we're looking from them.
Yeah, I think we all just need to strive for understanding and compassion. Eh, But I
Well,
do want to ask you,
sure.
should we try, should everybody try to completely eliminate anger, or do you think it has a purpose in our lives?
It probably has some purpose in our lives, and we can't ever completely eliminate it. As you just mentioned, the Buddhist monk who thought he eliminated it didn't completely eliminate it. It was still there. Yeah, it serves some purpose, but we can eliminate 80-90% of the anger that we normally experience, I would say. And
So
it would
you
be good.
wrote,
It'd be good for us to do it, because we would reduce the risk of all those bad things from happening in our lives.
so you wrote a book called Life Changing. Anger cure.
Yeah. And it's what we're talking about here is if you can understand where your anger comes from in terms of the three filters, and then you can develop the ability within yourself to recognize when your filters are wrong or faulty and correct for that, you're in a small way your life will be changed. In a big way your life will be changed because you'll now understand how all human emotions work. They all work the same way anger does. So if you get anxious, for example, you're
Yeah.
looking through a set of filters, two or three filters that your brain's telling you is true. It may or may not be true. Okay. But it's generating the emotion. If you feel guilty, same thing. Certain filters are causing the guilt. If you get sad, there's certain filters you're looking through. So you literally can change your life if you understand your emotions better and where they get generated, how your brain generates them. And usually your brain's playing a trick on you when it's giving you a negative emotion. Actually, our brains play tricks on us when we give us
All the time.
positive emotions as well. That's that
Yeah.
infatuation state of when you meet somebody and there's that initial
The
love,
honeymoon
the honeymoon, the love,
where
and
you
you
can't
look
keep your hands off each other.
and that person, they look perfect, they have no flaws,
They
characters
can't do nothing
100%, they
wrong.
can't do anything wrong. It's the opposite filter, but it's just as unrealistic. Okay, and then most
Yeah, just
people
wait
find
3
out
years.
later on. You find out, oh, wait a minute, this person had this character trait I don't like so much, and they do this I don't like so much.
It blinds you to the red flags,
It blinds you to the truth.
to the truth.
Yes, you had a distorted view. You're looking through
Yeah.
rose-colored glasses because you wanted to. Okay, and it makes you feel good. All right. But it's inaccurate. It's too positive. Okay, it goes to the other extreme, where when we get angry, we're too often too negative, or more negative than we need to be. Okay,
Mm.
yeah. So, for example, the second filter is some hurt and harm was done. So, let's say somebody says something to you that hurts your feelings. Okay, and you get angry. We're seeing that all the time, right? All the pronoun, you got to have your pronouns right.
Or you get angry
You
if you
can't
don't
say the
call me
wrong thing. Yeah.
this.
So
Yeah.
suppose somebody says something that hurt you. They mispronoun you or whatever it's called, and it hurts your feelings. Okay.
Mm.
So if you get angry, they did something they shouldn't have done. You were negatively impacted, and they were 100% responsible to blame. Okay. So let's look at the second filter. The hurt and harm was done, and if you really ask yourself, were you really hurt and harmed? Did you lose an arm or a leg? Or land in a hospital?
Like physically. Yeah.
No, no. You just had your feeling. Is that big a deal that your feelings were hurt? On the whole scope of things. What's the truth about that?
I mean,
But
according to them, it is.
in their mind, they've blown it up into be a big thing. Okay, and that's why they're
Yeah.
angry. But what's the truth? The truth, if you're looking at it from 30,000 feet, from a dispassionate, objective viewpoint, the truth is it's a very minor tweak. Is it? So yeah, so your feelings got hurt a little bit. Big deal. Okay. Uh, so
It's
when you
not
were
a big deal to
In
them,
the
though.
Navy, if you told your commander or whoever who was in charge, oh, you hurt my feelings, are they gonna
Oh,
are
no.
they gonna pay attention to that? They're gonna say that's move on, get in line.
Carry on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Carry on.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what they
They're
say.
they're
Carry
they're
on.
gonna they're gonna react to it truthfully that it's a minor thing, and it's not given what our mission is, given what our goal is, given what we're trying to accomplish here. It's really insignificant. Okay. And that's the reality in that
That's true.
context.
Yeah.
That's the reality. But you can blow it if you want. You can make it this
You
huge
can blow
thing.
anything up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You make it a major offense. And that's what we do, and that's why we're generating all this anger today because we're not seeing things realistically as they actually are and putting them in the proper perspective. We've got these false perspectives that our brain's giving us, and it's driving a lot of our anger. And the media is doing it too. The media knows these three filters backwards and forwards. The media knows how to make us angry.
They know how to like push the buttons.
And the buttons are they give us a story. They give us a story where they tell us somebody did something bad and wrong. They hurt and harmed somebody and they were 100% responsible or to blame. End of story. Nothing more to look at here. Nothing more to think about here. Nothing more to consider here. This is the truth. Believe us. We're telling you the whole thing. And if you believe that, okay, you're going to get angry because that's what they're selling you. They're selling you anger. or they'll sell you fear, or there's some other emotion that'll get you.
Fear mongering.
Yeah, yeah, but they do that through the fear filters. But they know the filters that produce human emotions, and that's what they're feeding their narratives into, because they know it'll drive the emotion that they want to people to experience. But we're sitting there like sitting ducks. We don't see what's happening. We don't understand the dynamic of how anger gets created, how other people can create anger in us by taking advantage of these three filters that our brain is constantly, sending us our own fake news.
Yeah, I recently made a tweet about self-awareness, and I think this being like it's all about being self-aware. I think the
Yes.
first step to any type of growth
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
being self-aware. And I said thinking about my own thoughts. This is step one to self-awareness.
Yeah. And that is first thing you have to you have to be able to kind of interrogate your own thoughts and
Your own thoughts.
question your
Yeah.
own thoughts.
Thinking about your own thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So where should we begin? You ready?
Four.
This game.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
You could skip this one. They're completely random. This one is a kinky one.
Yeah.
Do you care?
I'm not into kinky, but that's okay. You want to pick another one? That'd be fine.
Well, this one, it says share something that's heavy about when my sex life was never the same after this happened.
GGG. I think my first sexual encounter.
Yeah.
I was
Your first time?
I was a late bloomer. Most of my friends had done the thing before me, and so I felt behind. And there was this one girl in our social group who was very promiscuous, and so I arranged I needed a place. We agreed that we would get together and do this, and we needed a place. And a friend lent me his house because his parents were at this was in Baltimore. They were at the Oriole baseball game.
Oh, yeah.
So our first encounter, I had my first encounter listening on the radio to the baseball game, so I would know when it was over. So when we had to get out of the house before they came home, I think that kind of, I think that
Like, keep the radio on.
ruined listening to baseball. I think it kind of ruined the experience a little bit.
That's hilarious. I was a early and late bloomer.
Yeah.
Like, I lost my virginity when I was 14.
Oh,
It's crazy. I'm publicly saying this.
yeah.
And then I didn't, since 14, it didn't happen until I was 20 again.
Hmm.
So it was like 6 years.
Yeah.
But, I mean, everyone's different.
Yeah.
But you ready for my final questions? These can be quick.
Sure.
First question is, what is your biggest regret in life?
I talk about it in my book where I got angry at I was angry at my mother for a number of years as I was growing up, because she kept treating me as a kid, and I wanted to be treated more like an adult, and it reached a breaking point one day where I said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And I didn't talk to her or my father for 7 years, even though we lived in the same city,
Same town.
couple miles apart. Yeah. And
Wow.
and later on, I realized that it was stupid of me to have been angry with her in the first place, which I didn't realize. I didn't realize for most of those years. But towards the latter part of it, I kind of awakened to the fact that, wait a second, that was really dumb. That was, I mean, I was blaming.
What were you holding on to?
The fact that
holding on to
my mother
blame
kept treating me like a kid, that she kept she kept doing motherly things that I thought she should have changed as I grew older. As I changed,
Do you have kids?
I have kids. Yes, I have
I think
a daughter.
That changes as soon as you become a parent yourself.
Yeah. Well, this was before I was married, but I realized that she's just doing what she's always done, what she only
Yeah.
she just wants to be a mother and wants to
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing was stupid. But so I kind of regret the fact that I put them through those 7 years.
You didn't want to be a baby anyway.
Yeah, and then I realized my mistake, and I went and I apologized to them, and we patched
All are
everything
good
up.
now.
And they both have passed on now, but we had the
Wow.
last years of our relationship were fine. We didn't never had any anger or anything like that. So I got past the whole thing. But I did put them through 7 years of that. At the time, it felt like it was important for me to develop my own sense of independence and stuff from them.
When it comes to relationships, do you think we need to resolve these, let's say like with relatives, like in your case and even my case, do you think we need to solve these like walk on eggshells conversations to move on, or do you think we could just cover those up and just be civil with each other?
I think we can do a lot of it within ourselves by understanding where our anger is coming from and realizing where the faults are, where the mistakes are, where the blind spots are. And when we start correcting that within ourselves, now the other person's behavior probably won't change at all
Yeah.
doing that. But like I said, my mother's behavior didn't change. She lived to be 94. She never stopped
But
treating me
you
like she
changed.
never stopped
Yeah.
treating me like a kid the whole time. But once I realized it wasn't that big a deal and it wasn't a horrible thing that she was doing, I wasn't angry about it anymore. It didn't make me feel bad anymore. So I mean, we can. So she didn't
Mm,
change a bit. But I figured out where I was wrong, and I corrected where I was wrong, and then from that point on, I didn't have any anger towards her, and could be around her, all the time and not be
yeah.
uncomfortable. So a lot of it we can do ourselves. We don't need
Do within
we don't need the
ourselves.
other person to agree or to reciprocate or
Some
this.
closure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
It's within yourself.
we can do it. And the same for somebody if you're angry at somebody that dies and you don't have that person
Mm.
around anymore, you can still resolve your part of it or your feelings about it by understanding, these processes. So it's very powerful. And we talk about what I discovered. It's funny. I saw in some of your literature about your podcast about unleashing the champion within. Okay. So that literally was happened for me. If you'd asked me in my 20s and 30s, do I believe that I have the power within me to not be an angry person anymore? I would have said absolutely not. There's no evidence whatsoever that I have that power. Okay. And
Mm.
then I go off and I do some personal development work and I learn some stuff and I put some stuff together and I come up with, I understand some of these things. And then boom, now all of a sudden I've got this enormous power to get rid of my anger. Well, that power was there back in those years when I didn't think I had it. It was, and
It was just buried.
it
Yeah.
was buried, and I got some insights that enabled me to tap into it and use it, but it was always there. So literally, I tapped into my anger champion or the power to eliminate anger that I didn't even know I had. And I've worked with lots of people over the last 40 years teaching them the same thing. And most of them didn't believe that they had the power to do anything about their anger. And then you show them the system, you show them these filters, you show them what to do about the filters, how to get down to what's really true and not true. And lo and behold, they go like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize I can get rid of this anger, but I can." It's like amazing.
Yeah. We all have it.
Yeah, yeah. And we have lots. And the other thing, we have lots of other powers too, that are
Mm.
sort of buried inside. We don't get the right input or the right environment to let them out, so we can see that we have them. But once you do, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. Once the power comes out, it's like it's kind of there for good. You know?
Especially when you believe in something, like if you have a big vision or
Yeah,
ambition,
yeah,
I think that helps a lot. Like seeing that you can do these things,
yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah.
My next question is, who or what has made the biggest impact in your life so far?
Uh, um, well, like I said, there was a lot when did the personal development stuff. There was a lot of different people. There's a guy I just read. It's funny. I wrote a chapter. There's a book coming out soon. Matter of fact, next week, called "The Book I Read." And it's a compilation
Mm.
book. And it's a bunch of authors who've been successful, and they're each writing a chapter about what's a book that made a really huge difference in your life. Okay,
Hmm.
so there was this book that I ran into back in like 1980 by a guy named Umberto Maturana, who was a Chilean biologist,
Hmm.
and he was in the United States traveling and teaching, and he was doing courses for physicians about the biology of language and being human and awesome. And I went to San Francisco with about 20 or 30 other physicians, and we spent 5 days with him. And he wrote this book called Autopoiesis and Cognition. And when I first looked at the book before the conference, I couldn't understand it. It was in English, but I just couldn't understand what he was talking about. But after spending 5 days with him, and then when I read the book, it's like, oh my God, this explains how the brain works, how what makes us
Mm,
human, and that has had an impact on me ever since. All the things that I teach now,
really?
yeah, I don't teach his stuff, but it's informed. The things I teach are informed by the things I learned from him in that 5 day workshop, and also in the book and he's written other books too that I read, and I've heard him speak on other topic stuff. But he was a very brilliant guy. He just died a few years ago, but he was a very, very brilliant, very well respected thinker in the
Yeah.
field of biology. And he also was a star in the psychotherapy field, family
Mm.
therapy, psychotherapy. They all kind of found some usefulness in his models of how how human beings function in groups and communities and families and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean, honestly, I think change happens in an instant, you know? Like I think it can be like a culmination of things, but I
Mhm.
think there's one instant where you just, you know, you have that epiphany moment in your
Yes.
brain where it's like, okay, this is where change is happening.
Yeah. And actually, I wrote about that exact same thing in the book. So, in the book, Dr. Orman's Life Changing Anger Cure, I
Yeah.
talk about my early angry days and how I, thing with my mother, and I had anger with my sister and other people. And then I talk about how I went from being not so angry, I mean, to being very angry to being not so angry. Okay. And what actually happened along the way? What were those
Yeah.
key turning points? Okay. And there was a turning point where I was sitting in a seminar in a personal development seminar on relationships. Okay. And in that seminar, my mind started to wander, and the little voice in our heads, that talks to us, suddenly said to me, "You can't run a marathon."
What?
Now you have to have the background. The background is I
Yeah.
hate up to that point. I hated running. I thought
I hate
I,
running
I thought
too.
people who ran marathons belong in mental hospitals. There was nothing about marathons that was attractive to me. I didn't like exercise. I didn't like running. I hated it. And I'm sitting there in this as they're not talking about exercise or running or anything. And the little voice goes, "You can't run a marathon." And I'm going like, "Well, of course I can't run a marathon." But why is it? Why does my brain trying to tell me that I can't run a marathon?
Automatically believe it, yeah.
And my thought was, could there be a natural runner inside of me that I don't know is there,
Untapped.
untapped? And I describe what happened after that point in the book, because that was a key event that led me to become an anger elimination expert. Because what I discovered about running translated into what I discovered about anger and how to eliminate it. And it's all I explain it in the book.
The
It's a
day
long,
you
a long,
daydreamed.
but it was that moment. It was that literally. It was that, and I said the title of the chapter is the day my life changed forever.
When I was daydreaming in a conference, I
Yeah,
was supposed to pay
yeah,
attention to
that's right, that's right.
that.
And I lay out the whole process of what happened after that and how it led to the anger stuff. So it's a very interesting story, but it's a long story, so we don't have time to go into it here. But
Have you ever ran a marathon since then?
I ran a marathon then, and I've run four more, two Boston marathons.
Oh, wow.
Ended up running 2,000 miles a year for 25 years until I had to quit because of my back.
See,
But
that's crazy.
I went from hating running and thinking long distance runners were insane to loving running and just loving long distance running and having a great time doing it. So,
I still hate running, even though I'm like big into like bodybuilding and fitness.
mhm.
But I do run every now and again. I think there's something about it that, especially if you run like just with no music or something, or even with music, like it helps, I don't know, like clear your head or something.
Yeah, yeah. And I used to do it. I ended up doing it more as almost a meditative
Yeah, like a
process.
meditative. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it was very interesting. The things that I learned in that process of deciding to run a
Hmm.
marathon and training and knowing that I was going to have to figure out how to enjoy running because there was no way I was going to do all this work.
You got to make yourself believe that you like it.
So I had to find out. Again, I had to find out the ways in which I was making running into an unpleasant experience, which is what I did. I used myself as a laboratory to discover all the unconscious ways that I was thinking about running and running that was counterproductive, or inefficient, or made the experience more physically unenjoyable. And I did. I found out a whole bunch of different things I was doing that I didn't even know I was doing. But then I became self-aware. Talk about self-awareness. I became self-aware, and every time I became aware of one of the ones, then I could put in a correction for it, and then my running became easier and lighter, and it was like a whole process like that. It's really cool.
Dr. Mort, I have 3 more questions for you. The next one is, what is one lesson you had to learn the hard way?
One lesson I had to learn the hard way is that not only is it okay to be wrong, but it's actually good to want to be wrong a lot of the time, if in the right domains. Okay, so to the point, the reason why it was so hard for me is because I was trained as a doctor. So as a doctor, you're trained every day. Don't be wrong. The worst thing that can
This
happen
is
is
the
be wrong.
right, this is the right way.
And being wrong is dangerous. It can hurt people. So thou shalt not be wrong is the is the credo, when you go through medical training. And so you develop this aversion to being wrong. Now, in medicine, that's good. You want your doctor to have a strong dose of, I don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to misdiagnose you. I don't want to put the decimal place in the wrong place on your prescription. I don't want to be wrong. And so that was very handy in that domain. Okay. But when you go into your personal life and your relationships and you're dealing with your emotions and the stuff we're talking about here, being wrong is like the greatest thing in the world, because you figure out that your brain is making you wrong a lot of the time, and it's hiding it from you. It's tricking you. And if you can figure out how your brain is doing that, then you can actually, get past it and become even more right. So it's a superpower that I was completely shut off from because of my medical training, because I would not allow myself to consider that I was wrong about stuff, because it was part of my ethos as a doctor. But once I let go of that and said, wait a second, this being wrong thing has got some real benefits to it. And I can discover a lot of things that I thought I knew, but that were incorrect. And now I can correct them. That's great. That's how you end up mastering lots of areas of life that many people can't figure out how to master. Ultimately, you end up realizing you were wrong about this and that and that and that, and then you correct it. And for me in running, that happened for me. Like, I was wrong that I thought I couldn't enjoy running. I was wrong. Okay. I thought I couldn't run a marathon. I was wrong. I thought running was inherently a unpleasant experience. I was wrong. Okay. I thought that running was the problem. I wasn't making running a bad experience. Turns out I was wrong. I was making it a bad experience in about 30 different ways that I didn't know I was doing. So I came up with all these. I was wrong about everything.
You come up with your own narrative to think a certain way and believe in a certain way.
And then not just believe, but have it turn into reality. There's difference between belief. I can believe I'm a unicorn, but it's not going to happen. Okay. But if I can go from hating running, saying I believe that it might be, it really was literally a might. It might be possible for me to figure out how to enjoy running. I can believe that, and then I can make it happen, because it actually turns out to be true. I didn't know it at the time, but ultimately I confirmed the fact that it was true. I had no way of knowing whether it was or wasn't, but it turned out to be true. So when you
I 100%
imagine
agree.
something that's possible or that's true, like the whole thing with Kennedy saying we're going to put a man on the moon or a human on the moon in 10 years, nobody knew that could happen, but it happened. He imagined something
Did it?
that turned out to be possible, and we did it. Very different from just having a random belief that you say, I think that's true. Well, yeah, maybe not. Maybe not.
No, I even spoke about that in one of my solo podcasts. I said sometimes you have to to grow or to understand something better, sometimes you have to take 5 steps backwards to take 10 steps forward and to progress.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big proponent to exactly what you're saying. Sometimes you have to, it feels like you're taking a step back by being wrong,
But you're
but you're
actually moving
actually
forward.
progressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what's
So
next?
next is, what would you want to experience in life if you had all the time and all the money?
I would want to get the knowledge that I put into my book into curricula in all schools
Mm.
all around the world. Okay. I want to see kids in middle school, high school, college, really understanding their emotions in the way we've been talking about today, where they can understand how their brain is generating their emotions and give them the power to tap into their own power as a human being to, step in and challenge what their brain is telling them and figure out what's true from what's not true, and then live happier, healthier lives, have better relationships, all that kind of stuff. So I want to see this. I want to see this become part of the curriculum and sort of life mastery skills that we're not teaching now in schools, but we should. And handling your emotions, having true emotional intelligence, is one of those key life mastery skills I think everybody should have when they graduate from their educational system that we're not
I
we're not communicating right now. So
We're not taught half the stuff we should
absolutely.
be taught to be adults. To be.
Absolutely. And to be happy, successful, low stress adults, we're not being taught.
Have you ever thought about writing like children's books? I think that would be one step towards
Personally,
it.
no, I haven't. I don't know that I ever will. I've written a lot of nonfiction books, but that's kind of my lane. But I mean, you never know. You never
Yeah,
know.
I just think that would be, because if you want to also impact kids from a young age, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
writing something
I think my role would be
like
more,
that.
having somebody else who's into that and skilled in that do it, and then I can collaborate with them and help them
Mm,
structure the
yeah.
content or the messaging that would be helpful. So yeah,
No, I mean, it's a powerful ambition
yeah.
and I support it.
Thank you.
My final question is not really a question. Is there any last thing you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to realize that there are lots of myths about emotions in general and anger in particular that we've all been sold, and you shouldn't believe them. You shouldn't believe that like you have to have anger to have a good life. There may be times when it's useful, as we've talked about, but most of the time you can get rid of most of the anger that you have, and you'd be much better off if you did. And there's no truth to the rumor. If you've been an angry person, you have to stay an angry person. I'm a demonstration that's not true. Other people have done that. The monk that you talked about did that in the way they did it. It's absolutely doable to go from being an angry person. I mean, if you just have the right understanding, and that's what I try and share with people. So there's lots, and we've talked about some of the myths here. There's lots of myths running around about anger that you should not buy into anymore, and realize that you as a human being have tremendous power, whether you know it or not. You have tremendous power to eliminate most of your, I call it unwanted anger. It's the kind that's not serving some useful purpose. It's the kind that ends up being harmful to our health or our relationships or our careers, whatever. So don't put up with anger in your life. It's not necessary. You don't need it to have a good relationship. You don't need it to be successful in life. You can do away with like 80-90% of the harmful anger that we have. So that's my parting message. Don't put up
Shoot,
with it.
all of it.
Don't
No,
put up
just
with
kidding.
it.
Dr. Mort Orman, everyone, go check out his book, is it Dr.
Dr.
Orman's Life
Orman's Life
Changing?
Changing Anger Cure. Yeah, if you just put Life Changing Anger Cure in the Amazon search bar, you'll find it.
And I'll also link to it in my show notes and description. So everybody support him in that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Oh,
Thank
it was
you.
fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks.
All
Thanks.
right.
All right.
Peace.
Thanks.